All right. Hey, I'm gonna go over all the major tickers today, both the ones that I traded and some of the other ones as well that I didn't trade for specific reasons or were just showing a lot of action. And I'm probably gonna do more of these in the future as well, just as an alternative to doing written DRCs since I end up usually writing a lot of stuff. So yeah, start with the leader today. The leader was SONN. This guy here. Paper trading terminal loading up. So SONN, this guy was pretty dilutive. Gapping up 140% or something like that. Float of 1.75, pretty low float, nothing much in the IO, and this thing had hella warrants. It had hella warrants, and it was also really expensive to locate this thing. I think it was, I had to pay like 0.3 per share for this thing too, which even though it was doing like max out like $13.50 down to $4 a range, that's still like quite a lot to end up having to pay for something like this. Especially since I had no idea if I was going to get a setup at the time, and by the time the open came around, it was more like 0.5, so it was ridiculous. Anyways, for this guy, very dilutive. The only I think playing the open was really the only way you could have played this thing, and I don't really have a setup for trading the open for stocks like this, so I ultimately didn't end up trading this one at all. But I think it's still worth covering. This thing, like, if there was ever a stock that you could short the open on, it would have been something like this. We had this double top over here that we started out with on the day. It was right near where we had these 1240 and these 1240 warrants. So we double topped at warrant prices, went sideways for a little while, attempted to break higher and completely failed. And this thing, right? So this thing's up like 140%. Super dilute daily. We crossed major resistance levels already on this, and we had warrants underneath us as well. There's a couple of like random things like 1.6, but there were some big ones. Where are they? These ones here, 960, and it was only about 961. Yeah, so these guys were like super dilutive, and yeah, I mean, if there was ever a short the open situation, it would have been something like this. Although this was still outside my playbook, so I didn't end up trading it. The only other action that the stock, I guess, had was around the midday. We had these like flat tops, and it tried to break higher through VWAP, but got stuffed into a knife, and that was the end of it for this thing. That was it, full fade. So did not end up getting anything out of this one. Let's go over here. I will cover FOXO after EATS. This thing had a pretty low float too. I think it was a bit over 2. Let me take a look. And not too much dilution though. It was about 3. Some IPO warrants, active shelf, nothing crazy with dilution though. And yeah, so aside from the big move for bag holders, not a whole lot going on. I know some people who shorted the open on this thing. I'm not entirely sure what prompted them to do so, but yeah, I don't short the open, so I didn't end up having a trade on this either. And yeah, as you can see, it didn't really go anywhere for the rest of the day, so not really too much else going on here. Next, guess I'll cover ARBB. ARBB, although it gapped and was moving a lot in the post market and the pre market, it was not on the top of my watch list until it started doing extra volume over here, and it of course caught my attention once it started making new volume highs. That's usually my cue to consider looking at something like this for a long. So I started looking for a long around here, although I wanted a better average since we were pretty far off of VWAP, which really got taken down off of the open. And I ended up taking a trade over here around 0.9-ish. And I was looking for a really strong rotation on this thing, honestly. This is not the first time ARBB has done a move like this either. They have some like pretty big historical runners, but like just a couple of days ago they had this here, which gave you a much more extended move relative to the pre-market range. And over here, we didn't even make it to the first major like level in my mind, which was basically right here. Like, this is what I was targeting for potentially taking off some size on. I would have taken off size here if it had not been strong into this level. And I mean, based on the price action we had here, I was probably going to intend to take off size there, although we never ended up making it. So in the end, and I'll show you my executions on this, the way it ended up panning out was I took a very, very small win on this basically because it hit my stop. And yeah, so there's the entry. I ended up exiting on the breakdown. Thesis was dead here basically, and never ended up covering anything over here because I was really keen on us making at least a 115 and potentially even pre-market high. Like with the last time this thing had done a move, I think it was totally in the cards for this to move up way, way higher. There were some pros and cons here. I believe this guy had this guy had a relatively high float based on the dollar price, so like almost 20 million, and not a lot of dilution. That's funny, this guy's are cash flow positive too, but yeah, the fact that we had this previous move was probably the most important thing here because this was copycat price action. The dilemma here is the float's probably rising if they are finding a way to dump shares on the open market. And at the very least, I'm not expecting as much strength into a take two on this than the first time. However, I think it was certainly something worth trying. And I still ended up getting like a decent move out of this. Like, this thing was actually up quite a few Rs before it started to go against me. If I TP'd out like near the highs, I would have had over 3R here. Although yeah, I wanted higher. 115 was an easy target for this thing to reach from a liquidity perspective. I frankly wanted like pre-market high, honestly. So yeah, I didn't end up taking off any size here, and I'm not really too upset about this trade. It happens. Especially with these long setups, you got to go for larger take profit goals. And could go over FOXO. I guess I'll mention DGT briefly here. Obviously, the election was last night, and DGT had a big up move, and frankly, a really lackluster day, honestly. I've seen a couple people short it, and the only standing thesis I see here is like buy the rumor, sell the news kind of thing, where yeah, where the pre-market stuff would have been over euphoric for what the outcome was. But at the same time, I'd like to point out that basically everything else in the stock market today was up a lot. Like if we go over the Qs, these guys were going bananas today. All day we had a grinder here. Coin, which is for all intents and purposes a DJT sympathy to some extent, or at least a Trump sympathy, was also up like massively today as well. So I'm honestly not too sure why this thing didn't follow suit, to be honest with you. This is probably what I would have expected much more from a failed election result, but here we are. So I didn't end up trading this at all. Not that I typically trade stocks of this size, but with the opportunity for this thing to see so much volume today, I thought there is a chance that I end up trading this, and I was watching it all day, and of course I didn't end up finding anything. In fact, unless you caught the first breakdown at the beginning of the day, like this thing was relatively sideways all day. We didn't even have too much like volatility compared to the previous day's price action either. So yeah, I don't know what to say about this one. I mean, in my mind, this is really lackluster compared to what this thing could have done. But yeah, it is what it is. The action was really on Coinbase, and Bitcoin as well the night prior also made a big move as well. These guys were up quite a lot following. Like procedurally, as the news came out that Trump was going to do better, so we're going to end up probably winning the election. So yeah, but yeah, by the time the open came, I think all the good opportunities were gone, if there even were any to begin with, honestly. So yeah, and something I did end up trading. These TMQ guys here, we'll go over to this. These guys did not gap a lot, and my data feed's going to be a little messy, so I've got thinkorswim here. I only have data for NASDAQ stocks on here on TradingView, so I'll go over here and get the full data for NYC stuff. Yeah, so this thing was not gapping big, which I guess is good for the long thesis. And I was originally not really interested in this thing. I'm not going to lie. I'll show you why. If we go on over here, the float on this was absolutely tremendous. So I didn't have much of a reason to believe that this thing would even be in my wheelhouse, honestly. No dilution either. Has a shelf going on, but no dilution actively. And this caught my eye after it started going absolutely bananas. And this kind of price action is not typical of something with 100 million plus share float. This does not happen. So I was keen on giving it a try to the short side just on the basis of how much extension it had done. You don't even need dilution at that point realistically. So I did end up trying this short, although with no dilution and with a really weird float. I only took half size, and I'll show you the execution. Normally how I trade something like this, like a morning spike, is give it 2 tries. Although I told myself I'd only give it 1 try because I didn't want to end up throwing myself into something that was a really just like not a good setup. And yeah, the fundamentals just made this. It made it tricky. So I ended up trading this. This is my first short right here, of course, or my only short. Trade off the breakdown into prior bar low. This is like basically how I always play these. And initially it was all right, rejected, went higher, ended up getting stopped out. Half size, ended up taking a slightly over half size loss. It was very small. And the second one would have been, again, a new prior bar low right here, which of course ended up leading into the winner, but I did not take it because I said to myself I'd only do 1 try on this, which was a real shame because this thing ended up doing almost a full rotation of the intraday range. So yeah, it is what it is. I guess if I had gotten the entry, and that's assuming I could have actually gotten the fill, I probably would have gotten the fill. Would have been like, realistically, I'd be taking off size around here. Maybe I would have waited for the 2R. Probably would have taken off size around like 0.9, somewhere around here. Like, realistically, this was about like a 2.5R trade, something like that, probably. Maybe I would have held like a lot longer, but you can see we didn't get much more out of it for the rest of the day. So, yeah, so I ended up missing that one. I can't be too upset about this, I guess. I mean, I didn't really lose a lot of money on this stock either, but yeah, it is what it is. It's kind of unlucky, honestly. And of course we have FOXO. Is there anything else in here I want to cover? I guess SGBX real quick. Had a long setup on this thing that I did not take. I just didn't see this, didn't have enough stocks like open, not enough monitors to watch this one. It was too low down on the list, had a really lackluster open, figured nothing would happen. And yeah, this thing ended up setting up like, I would have had my long bracket would have been probably something like, I guess open it up with this on. Would have been like, probably would have had a long somewhere like this here, targeting partials at pre-market high, partials at parabolic, 3R trade, something like that. Again, didn't end up taking this one. If I had more screen real estate, I probably would have seen this, and that's what I would have taken. But yeah, didn't end up making or losing anything here. Not too big of a deal. And I guess we'll go over the big one today. So this guy was gapping up about 100% today. And FOXO is a bit of an anomaly too, honestly, in terms of its behavior. These guys have a crazy fade history. Like, this stock loves to do fades, and I mean, you can see all these like wicks here, right? But I mean, even these wicks don't really do it justice because this thing has like a lot of like pre-market fades. Like, it does not make it too often. Had something going on back here in February, but like for the vast majority of the time, these are like hyper dilutive looking fades. And That's clearly not what happened today. If we go on over here to the filings and stuff, moderately high float, this is pretty standard for something in its price range. It's very slightly cash flow positive. That's kind of interesting. There's like almost no dilution. So it was slightly bullish. The fact that this is day after the election too made this it made it a target for me for possibly bullish price action, but I don't necessarily have a play on this thing until later in the day, although I was very tempted to like look into shorting the open on this, honestly, because yeah, we had almost everything lining up. If like the fact that this thing has like no dilution and people are going to short it into oblivion made it very interesting. And this is not actually the kind of pre-market action it usually does. Like if I go back here in time, you'll see like we had less pre-market action. I mean, I guess not that. Like again, I've got the only have the Nasdaq data feed, so this data is kind of messy. You can see some of these here, very, very small amount of price action, small amount of price action, small amount of price action, very small amount of price action here. This thing was holding up for quite a while. This thing held up for basically the entire pre-market, and that on its own was very atypical of this stock. So I was already thinking that something might be different in this thing today, especially given how many people were going to try shorting it. There was a lot of squeeze potential here if something different happened today. And we had this trend line setting up, and we almost obeyed the trend line. This is very typical where what will happen is like right off of the open, the trend line will break and then reclaim. And if you're following a pre-market trend line, you disregard whatever happened here. Like this does not invalidate the trend line. Just the additional volatility from open kind of temporarily curbs the trend line's effectiveness. And I've seen this in many instances. So I still had this trend line written out. I wasn't trying to make a new one or anything like that, but again, I don't have any setup for this at the open, so I wasn't necessarily looking to long this or anything. In fact, I played this the way I would normally play 100% plus gapper, and I was looking to short pre-market high, so that's what I did. And yeah, so we broke pre-market high, and I shorted into this tiny little breakdown here, which ended up failing really hard, and I got very unlucky with this position I took. Let me open it up here. Let's see the first one. We'll talk about this in a second, but yeah, with this guy here, I shorted a little bit earlier, anticipating the breakdown. Breakdown fails, and I got stopped out over here. What I was looking at was on the sub minute. We'll go over here on the 15-second chart. Got a pretty clean one on my Weeble feed. I don't toss into the sub minute charts, so I gotta get it on here instead. Yeah, so get the arrow here too, perfect. So what I was trying to do here was short off this breakdown, right? And what I'm looking for ideally is a flush right through pre-market highs and immediate continuation. And I mean, sometimes obviously that won't always happen. So I have my stop at the swing high, which is not visible here on the 1 minute chart, but it was visible over here. We failed the breakdown pretty strongly, and I thought to myself, I'll give it one try at the swing high, otherwise I'm stopping out there. And so we ended up breaking swing high, placed this candle here when it printed, knife down, and I'm like, okay, if it's gonna liquidity grab swing high and then knife, this is how it's gonna start, right? So yeah, so it does this, it like sort of knives, right? I bring my hard stop in at this point, and I'm like, I don't have any more tolerance for loss here. I'm supposed to be out at swing high for this setup. So set it here, ends up breaking higher, and then nice free a second time. So I ended up getting stopped out just barely on this thing. And yeah, now I wouldn't have taken profits here, but I ended up taking a loss on something that would have otherwise been a break-even trade. And again, this was kind of unlucky. Usually I'd have my stop at high day for something like this, but because of how far away high day was from pre-market high, this is a variation of my strategy where I need to compensate by playing the swing high, and usually that works fine. when high day so far away, but in this case it didn't. Yeah, this was unfortunate. So not much I can do about that. At the very least, didn't end up missing any win. This thing went sideways basically all day, and again, I was thinking about the long thesis since the open basically, especially on this stock. Like this was like I was of the mindset this morning that we were probably going to get something crazy. I just didn't know what, but this was the best vehicle for it to happen, between the fact that it didn't have any dilution and the fact that the pre-market behavior was really unusual compared to the way this stock usually behaves. So yeah, so we start going sideways for a long time. We end up breaking up here. We've got a lot of knives, right? So we have a lot of shorts that are all coming to this stock, right? And I mean, this is pretty typical, like stupid nonsense where the stock's going sideways for a long time. He keeps knifing the highs, keeps like doing weird dilution stuff, and eventually like shorts have like a whoopsie moment and they all get squeezed out. So now the reason why I shorted exactly here, or the reason why I longed exactly here, was because, so we have the trend line, right? And I guess I'll go over everything I saw here. So, right, so we go up, got a lot of shorts entering, especially on this first pre-market high break. That's including me usually, and break down, hit the trend line and start rotating. So the trend line's being respected into the open, or into like the intraday at this point. That's nice. Swing up here, grab liquidity, end up knifing again a little bit later. Some shorts getting stopped out, probably a lot more entering at the same time, and we wedge out up here. This wedge was really interesting, and I was very tempted to short this wedge, actually. Like, outside of my typical playbook, I didn't like it because of how we had this interaction with VWAP here, and I'm usually scared of these interactions with VWAP, but I mean, on a stock that's up over 100%, you know, and yeah, on a stock that's up over 100%, it's a very low risk trade that you can easily take instead of be stop here too. So like there was all that stuff going on. I had my finger on the trigger to take this. What ended up stopping me was literally just the interaction at the lows. That's quite it on the tape. We had we had a buy wall at like 0.33 exactly, and but we did not have a buy wall down here where the actual swing low was at 3288-ish, and I really wanted to short into a buy wall to get the fill, and we just didn't have one at 3288. So I was like, it's not that big of a deal. I wasn't like fiending to take this trade. It sucks that the buy wall was at 0.33. I was like, it's whatever. So I didn't end up taking this trade. It then didn't end up being much of a win anyways. Had I taken this, it would have been break even. And this is so we got this wedge, right? And this wedge is obviously attracting a lot of shorts. Like this is a phenomenal short setup typically. And if not obvious from the big red candle we have after the breakdown. And we have this rotation back up, like bounce off the trend line, reclaim the trend line, and like it was important at this point that you had conviction that this trend line was legitimate here, because like we have this violation here, and we've got obviously a violation over here as well. But I mean, I've seen a lot of these play out, and especially with like retail manipulation based behaviors, having a trend line like this is actually kind of effective for like giving like short a guideline for like taking bad averages if you're trying to manipulate the stock upwards. So it crossed my mind, and this is like enough respect that I'm paying attention to it. And you can see like later on, like over here with these lows, like this trend line was solid. Like people were obviously watching it, if not retail manipulator too. So anyways, we do with this reclaim off of the wedge, which is insane. This like almost never happens. Like these kind of wedge reclaims, I never see this. This is crazy. So we get this wedge reclaim. We end up hitting a knife after some liquidity grabs on this level here, and we just kind of go sideways a little bit. And the reason why I shorted exactly where I did is to clarify again, like at this point, like what is going on. I want to short, or I'm sorry, not short, long. The reason when I'm thinking about trying to long this thing, right? The first thing I'm thinking of is the fact that we're knifing the highs a lot. So a squeeze, as nice as it would be, is probably not the highest odds right now, unless we get something real crazy, which did end up happening. But like I wouldn't bet on that, even in the situation that I was in here. So I want to get an average low down, probably near the trend line. Like, it was a good option to play off of. And what I'm thinking of right here is like, so playing like the trend line in this area over here, right before the trend line breaks, is a long trap usually. Like, especially once you have at least two swings to new highs playing the trend line. Like, if I played it over here, like I didn't even get an entry over here, of course, but like if I did, playing the trend line to the long side over here is usually a long trap. Like, what it'll do is it'll break a swing high and then just knife immediately. Like, you'll get this over here. Like, imagine you tried longing. Where the heck is the arrow tool? Here it is. So imagine you tried like this interaction, these swing highs here, right? Or this one. Imagine you try longing here or here, right? And then you get knifed into. And then this usually breaks down, right? The differences here in this case are we had a breakdown and it failed, which is pretty rare. This almost never happens. So we have the breakdown and it fails. And I usually say like shorts are first up to bat, then the longs get a chance to show themselves afterwards. And the shorts ended up coming up to bat and they failed to show up. So they failed to show up, right? We start rotating higher, and then this is just freebie. This is just freebie, all this stuff over here. And what made this particularly interesting to me is like I could have entered off of any of these. I could have entered here or off of this one, but I entered off of this one over here once we had the knife that failed to see any reclaim, and we just rotated higher off of that. So I had the perfect entry, literally the perfect entry on this thing. So to capture the full move, I was severely undersized for this. I was planning on going half size anyways because this is completely outside my playbook. This is just such an abnormally unusual circumstance where everything was lining up for this trade. Like we had there was almost the only thing that was working against you here was the fact that we were like wicking out the highs. Everything else was in your favor here. There was like no dilution on this stock. It was up massively, had decent volume on the day where we had a major market catalyst, abnormal behavior, like aggregating, pulling in shorts all day long, doing like reclaims and stuff. Like this was like well poised for something like this to happen. And that's what we got. I guess if you were paying attention to the micro where you saw the knives here, then maybe you even get an average that's really nice like this, you know? So yeah. And I guess, let me open that up again. I did admittedly, I guess, pike out of this, right? Like I ended up getting an average like way down here too, because like I said, I was thoroughly convinced that like if we got up here, we're just gonna slam right back down. So I was not hesitant to take off size almost immediately. And seeing this move here, this curl into a new high, into another spraying squeeze candle as well, very unusual. This is weird price action. And I was hunting longs over here. Like I was hunting long setups, and frankly, like I didn't see anything that was like really good either. Like you could have played like the only thing that like worked out really was playing the breakout. That's it. Like this wasn't great overextension. I have a friend who played this short side like up here. I didn't, because it's just there's like, if I want to play shorts on especially a stock that's squeezing out shorts, then like I need to see like unreclaimable overextension basically. And the second leg here it has less overhead than this first leg does, so we're like curling over, right? And in it, like efficient price action curl over. There's a lot of opportunity for a squeeze later on if the stock still wants higher. Like for this thing to like top out, basically, we need to see parabolic behavior, and that's kind of what we got later on in the day, right? And like once you have this more like upward slanted behavior, now when we put in a high, it's a lot more severe, and it leads to a significant sell-off. But over here, right? We started it, but it couldn't hook. It couldn't hook. It didn't even make it back to VWAP, right? And eventually we rotated higher, where we have this like weird monster long, like short trap stock that's like playing out a bigger thesis where it's just like a murder fest. So yeah, but I didn't end up finding any longs here. Like there was like no good places to position your risk. That was the big issue with this thing. Like once we had broken this high, I'm obviously thinking, you know, like this is going to be something that could squeeze for the rest of the day. But how do I know where I can like hit down here, and get a nice RR on this? I didn't know, so I didn't end up taking anything. The only trade that I know sometimes works on these is a breakout. The breakout did work here. I wasn't on my PC at this point, but if I was, I may have taken this actually. So, but yeah, I did not. And even this like barely made the criteria for a real overextension for me to trade because we had so many intermittent red candles. But yeah, just this thing was rough. This thing was heavily manipulated, and although it didn't have any dilution, really, there was in the filings. There's like a lot of this company is giving out shares to a lot of people for like debts and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like big private owners, institutional owners on this stock that are looking for opportunities probably to sell their shares into. So it's possible that something like this was orchestrated by one of them. It's possible they're just piggybacking on what was essentially like a really crazy short squeeze as well. I don't know. Highly unlikely that this didn't start with an agenda, but where the agenda played out, I've got absolutely no idea. Very, very strange stock. I don't know how NYC ends up playing into the minimum bid price requirement. This stock has been under $1 for quite some time. So, I mean, it's possible. Like, I don't know if NYC stocks have the same regulations surrounding the $1 requirement. It may have had something to do with that. I don't really know. So, but yeah, that's all of them. And these are the guys that I ended up watching today. There was I guess there was CDI as well. They failed pretty hard though. Didn't really get enough overextension. Looks kind of overextended here, but like there's not a lot of percentage range here, so I didn't end up taking any trades on this. And I do think that was it. A lot of these are stocks that either went in the post market or yeah, that's about it. Yeah, just those guys. So I didn't actually check out Fun's doing. I think Fun also dropped quite a bit too. Yeah, just I mean this thing tailed DJT most of the day, it seems. So yeah, that's it. Those are the stocks I trade today. Yeah.